Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co host and dear friend, Jacob Acquire. And we wrapped up the AFC North this past Tuesday. We're talking about the AFC East today. And I'm excited. This is usually where we start our division breakdown. So it feels like this is the start of the journey. And this is the week that we're doing it. So very fitting to talk about the teams we will be discussing today. The way we're going to do it is kind of how we see the division playing out. So we'll start at the team at the bottom and then work our way to the top. No shocker, the Buffalo Bills are there. So we will be working towards them and the discussion that we'll have about their team. Jacob, how you been doing today?
Pretty good. I had my first fantasy football draft of the season last night. I know it's before all the preseason or all but one of the preseason games, but I feel good about my draft. Didn't get any Panthers players other than Rico Dowdle, so I'm a bit disappointed. I wanted Chuba Hubbard, I wanted T Mac, I wanted Bryce, but they all got sniped. So hopefully Dowdle will have a good year. And yeah, I'm just excited about football. That first fantasy football draft really puts you into football mode. So I'm ready to get rolling.
And it just all cascades from here. Like we have all the different drafts that we're a part of coming up. I'm in a couple other different leagues, and like you said, it's a fitting start to the football season, and that's what I feel like this past week has been. Like between the Hall of Fame game, fantasy drafts, some of the discussions on Twitter, it feels like football's finally back in the air again, and to start off today's discussion, we want to talk about the Jets. I like where they're trending. I'll leave it at that in terms of like the positives. They have a lot of work to do. Aaron Glenn, phenomenal head coach, going back to his time with the New Orleans Saints, and then obviously his recent stint with the Detroit Lions. For those of you who are not familiar, he was a former player and actually was drafted by the Jets, played under a guy that everybody kind of knows in a Pete Carroll. And I think he has garnished enough respect around the league to where the staff and the organization he is starting to build there in New York is very special. I love that fact that his defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks, and he brings a young offensive mind from Detroit staff to be the offensive coordinator in Tanner Extrand. I think I pronounced that right. I probably just minced it. What are your thoughts on this team? Again, just trying to like stay with the positives before we really get into, I think, the flaws of this roster.
Well, I think we're doing it in our collective order, or maybe leaning a bit more toward your order, because I think the Jets are likely, or I find them in the pole position to finish second in the division here. I think obviously the Bills are in their own class, but at the bottom here, I think all three of these teams could end up however you like. But with the positives of the Jets, this is a team last year that wasn't super competitive. We saw all the drama, right? Robert Saleh gets fired week five, I think week five or
Yep.
six. The first head coach fired. It was a shocker at the time because we were thinking it would be Dennis Allen, but Robert Saleh is the first one. After that, the strong defense that's been there forever just cratered under. I think it was Jeff Ulbrich, right? Was the interim and the defensive play caller at the time. Wasn't the best for them, but they have the talent on defense, and I think that the biggest or the crux of what the Jets have been in the Joe Douglas era. So going all the way back to getting rid of Sam Darnold, drafting Zach Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, all of that is it's a lot of impulse decisions. It seems like it's a lot of based on the now, not the future. And there's not a lot of grown-ups in the room who have like an NFL vision. Like, and when I say that, I feel like a lot of what went on during the Joe Douglas era, excuse me, was like, oh, this draft is super shiny. These trades look really cool. I think we can piece together a team. Kind of like, I don't want to say they were like playing Madden, but we know that Woody Johnson's grandsons are giving him Madden stuff and giving him Madden ratings for the players, a la the Jerry Judy trade that didn't happen because, quote, his son said he wasn't high enough, or grandsons, excuse me, wasn't high enough ranked on Madden. But I think now that you have Aaron Glenn, who's a no nonsense guy, been a really good defensive coordinator in Detroit and a good coach in New Orleans before that, Steve Wilks, who we know as Panthers fans is going to get the best out of his player. He's going to get his players. He's going to get the players committed to being professional on and off the field. I think when you bring those two guys in and let them coalesce and lead a team, it's going to look a lot better. It's going to look more professional, and they're going to be in the news for better reasons, not reasons like Aaron Rodgers turned his back to the coach during practice or something like that.
You are really harsh on Joe Douglas, and we aren't necessarily Joe Douglas stans, but what I will
Name his
say.
wins other than a Scott Fitterer trade.
So, and this is what I'm going to say is as he was going out the door, he brings in Elijah Vera Tucker, Olu Fashanu. I believe he drafted another tackle. He signed, I believe, Joe Tippmann. No, maybe it was drafted Joe Tippmann. It's
Drafted
it's
Tippmann.
it was Josh Myers from I think the Packers. They signed as like their center. They built the offensive line. Garrett Wilson's good. I don't think they really hit on any of the running backs. I do like that they kind of throw a fourth round pick kind of every year, every other year at a guy. Braylon Allen's a dude that can really be a force in between the tackles. But when you go on the defensive side, the front seven's a little thin. And all I'm getting around to say with Joe Douglas is that he put certain pieces kind of all over the roster, but really kind of what was the undoing is that they didn't hit on Zach Wilson and then obviously the Aaron Rodgers drama. And so that's, I think, the X factor for the Jets this year is you have to have like a stable presence at the quarterback position to be successful. Because this defense to me, the back four look like they could do some damage. You bring up Cisco, who they signed, Brandon Stevens, who they signed as well. You have your All Pro and Sauce Gardner. There's pieces there to work with, but outside of Quinion Williams and some of the other edge rushers they've drafted, like a Jermaine Johnson over the past couple of years, there's not a lot there. So I am very curious to see how Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilks get this defense to perform in year one and then what Justin Fields is able to do on offense, because he's got to be able to operate within structure. And if he can't operate within structure, this team is going to struggle early and often.
Yeah, Fields is the X factor for me. I'm a bit higher on their defensive front. Will McDonald, one of the edge rushers that they've taken in the first round. A lot of first round picks from Douglas. I think we don't chastise him enough for having so many first round picks and not putting together an elite team. But Will McDonald, I think, can be an elite player. He took a step last year. I think he had 10 and a half sacks. If he can be a marquee player for him, that'll be huge with Quinnen Williams and Derek Nottie, who they brought in to be that other defensive tackle to start. But back to Justin Fields, he has to be the X factor, right? Because if he can give an element of athleticism that we saw in his last Bears year, the year that DJ Moore played pretty well, Cole Kmet played pretty well, and it was because Fields was operating a bit more in structure, but also had the ability to go and get it with his legs, right? If we can get a bit back to that year of Justin Fields, I think that with the O-line that you talked about that they built, with the rapport of Garrett Wilson, with Brees Hall being somebody that's back and healthy, I think they have pieces on offense. And I should mention Mason Taylor, the tight end they drafted this year early in round two. I'm a big fan of him. I think if they can get Fields to kind of distribute the ball better and play a bit more in structure, like you're saying, they have winners at each position. It's just, I don't know how many plays they are going to win if Fields doesn't play near perfect, I guess is how I would put it.
It's like we're past the point. Like this is where it's like we're in the last like year or two of that Anthony Richardson experiment, and I don't think that's going to work out in the way that the Indianapolis Colts or a few other analysts thought that would maybe go. But Justin Fields has been a bust. Like this is his third team in as many years. It's not been working out. He has a tendency to be able to feed the number one wide receiver. So if you're looking for maybe a fantasy expectation for this offense, I think Garrett Wilson, being a former college teammate of his, is going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of targets, but he just doesn't process the field enough and he doesn't see over the middle of the field. So those two areas of his game make this very hard. And so this is where the new OC has to come in and be able to make things very easy. It's a simple high-low read. It's a simple just point and shoot. And there's no you having to break down what's going on. And if the offense gets simplified there, you're able to run the ball 20 to 30 times with this running back group behind this offensive line. That's what's going to give you a chance. Having Justin Fields drop back and be like, hey, we have some of these weapons, like I think that's a recipe for disaster. This is a guy that has proven he can't win consistently enough with his arm. So lean into the run game and then lean on your defense. But again, I think our expectations for kind of both of these units are a little bit different. I think you're a little bit higher on the defense and the offense, and I'm a little bit lower on them. And we'll see what plays out. I think they have the ability to play for the 2 spot in this division. I don't think that the spots that we're talking about today, 2, 3, and 4 in the AFC East, are locks by any means. I think the only team, barring a Josh Allen injury, is the Buffalo Bills as the number 1 team to win the AFC East. So any closing remarks on the Jets, like buying and selling? I know I kind of brought up fantasy stuff with Garrett Wilson. I think he is definitely a buy candidate, but outside of that, there's not a lot of optimism I have for this unit.
Yeah, I would buy Fields simply with the rushing upside as a fantasy football player. I think that this probably will be the best O line he's ever had. I know we like to picture the Steelers as being a good O line that they've built over the past couple of years, but I think the interior is good, but the tackles we don't really know yet. Broderick Jones hasn't stuck around, and a lot of the guys on the Steelers were really young and kind of fresh there. I think there's some rapport here with the Jets, although they also have two first year and second year tackles like the Steelers, respectively. So Fields would be somebody I'm looking at. I guess I just think that the talent on these rosters, maybe QB aside, for the Jets is higher than the other two. But if we get into the next team that we have written on the notes, the Miami Dolphins, I think you'll see what I mean. Obviously, the Dolphins have guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and when those guys are healthy, they can contend for the wide receiver tandems in the league, like with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, like now CeeDee Lamb's, George Pickens. If they're healthy, everything works out. But Tyreek Hill's getting older and older. Jalen Waddle's had injury issues. And then they just add on more injury slash guys who haven't played a ton over the past few years with Darren Waller, who unretired. And then I don't know if he's going to play for them or start for them or whatever. He's their projected starter right now. Tua Tagovailoa is pretty consistently injured. And if I were picking a team that I think would finish last in the division, it would probably be the Miami Dolphins.
I don't think you're wrong. And I think not consensus, the market has the Miami Dolphins around like close to a 500 team, a little bit under. And that's a little alarming because there's a lot of locker room issues in regards to Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa. And as much as I love Mike McDaniel, the play caller, the offensive designer down there in Miami, he cannot lead dudes. Like
Mm-hmm.
these are simple fixes by like a Mike Tomlin, a Nick Sirianni, heck, Andy Reid. Like at a certain point, he just didn't deal with this kind of like beef. Like he literally sent T.O. home at one point. I believe it was in the 2005 season after they had gone to the Super Bowl, and he was just done with the drama. And like this is he was the first guy to trade Tyreek Hill. He wasn't going to pay him and kind of keep dealing with his BS and rigmarole. And that's where I go back to Mike McDaniel, Chris Greer, the Miami Dolphins front office. We just talked about grown-ups in New York, and I love who they added in that building. I don't trust these guys. Frank Smith, well-respected offensive play caller. He's the reason why Darren Waller came out of retirement. It was a John Gruden interview, and I think he said like there was only 2 guys he come out of retirement for, and Frank Smith was one of them. Anthony Weaver, have a lot of respect for, coming from the Baltimore Ravens. They added some intriguing pieces in the secondary down the stretch to where they might be able to play complementary football with the investment they have on the defensive line. So a lot of these things could work, but because you don't have adults at the head coach and GM spot to be able to knock off this nonsense and get people to just play, it's hard to take this team seriously at the moment.
That's the point I try to make with the Jets. And we've had a couple episodes where I'm praising the Jets singular, excuse me, offseason edition of Glenn and Steve Wilkes. And I don't know Tanner Ingstrom, but I'm sure if those two guys are backing him up, he's a no nonsense guy. But like this is exactly why you look at the Miami Dolphins, where it's in pressers between Tua and Tyreek Hill and head coach Mike McDaniel. They're not sneak dissing each other, but they're telling each other, well, I wish you wouldn't have said that and stuff like that. Or like when Tyreek Hill says, yeah, on third downs, if we want to improve our third down rushing, take Devon Achan off the field, put in a different running back. Like maybe leave that to your head coach or your play caller to say things like that. So, like, if we're talking about my worries, it starts there and kind of trickles down through the offense. I talked about like how injury riddled the offensive side of the ball can be. The offensive line we know is it's been a disaster, and Tua's been able to mitigate that when he's on the field. But there's going to be some changes this year. Jonah Seven-Aia, their second round rookie, is projected to start in the interior. They signed James Daniels from, I think it was Pittsburgh, to be one of their starters. Aaron Brewer, their center, he replaces, I think it was Robert Jones that went to the Packers. Patrick Paul is going to start for the first time on the left tackle, and Austin Jackson, who not a super great right tackle. That doesn't seem like it's going to be any better than it usually is. So I'm kind of down on the offensive side of the ball. I'm actually pretty high on what their defense can be. I like how you mentioned the secondary changes that they brought in. Minka Fitzpatrick, obviously returning to Miami, where he started his career. Mike Hilton, they just signed a couple weeks ago, the nickel from Cincinnati, and I think that their defensive front actually can be very imposing this year. Obviously, they draft Kenneth Grant in the first round. He was a nose tackle at Michigan, but I think he's going to be more of a an odd front defensive end. I think he's able to do that with his athleticism. Zach Sealer just got paid. He's one of the most underrated players in the league. And then they have that tandem of Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb with Chop Robinson in tow, their first rounder from last year. If you would have told me that they hit top 10 marks pretty consistently on defense last year, I wouldn't believe you. But they were ninth in EPA per play on defense, 12th in success rate, and 10th in points per game allowed. So if you're looking for something to lean on as a Dolphins fan and be excited about, it's actually going to be the defense, not the offense that was so high powered. What was it now, 2 or 3 years ago, that shook the league with that 70-point game? I don't think we're ever going to see that again from this side of the ball, as long as this regime is there.
Tyreek Hill has to leave the team in some form or fashion, and then you start going, okay, so where is that speed? You obviously have Jalen Waddle. You're banking on a Darren Waller, like return to the NFL, which like again, like he was injury prone the last time we saw him. And then you look at Devin Achan and a few of the other guys, and it's just it doesn't seem to be enough juice. And because of that, I think that's where it's like you're one to an injury away from being bottom of the barrel. And that I think is the one issue with Mike McDaniel is he has not been able to figure out like a backup plan when Tua's out. Like there is no design or change in the offense to allow the backup to come in and succeed. And I
And you
think
know who
that
the
is going to
backup is
be
now, who
Zach Wilson.
needs a lot of help to succeed? Yeah, there you go.
And like you said, you brought up the offensive line. That's been the biggest issue. And it's just there's a lot of these Shanahan guys, Bobby Slowick in Houston, Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. Sean McVay's a little bit different because anytime he's been successful, he has an offensive line. When he doesn't have an offensive line, he's not successful. So when you look at kind of just all those caveats, it's just like Mike McDaniel not prioritizing protecting the quarterback, winning in the trenches. It's why everything looks flashy and well buttoned up in September, and it all comes falling apart come January. Because what matters most then is building in the trenches. Like you look at the teams that have like been making the Super Bowl outside of like the San Francisco 49ers. It's the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Go look at the investments on those O-line and then realize kind of what the Miami Dolphins are doing wrong. So I don't know what to like say about this team. Like if everybody stays healthy, yeah, they can win 9 or 10 games. Like they'll beat up on bad teams, they'll lose to playoff teams, and they'll put together a winning record. But if people get hurt and some of their core guys have injury histories, this is a team that could end up with a top 5 pick. And that completely changes the dynamic. It probably means the head coach is out of there, might mean Tua's out of there, and it might mean just starting from scratch.
To their credit, I think they did try to invest in the fronts in the draft this year. But they had 2 picks in the first, I think 140-ish picks. They had a first and a second rounder. That was it. So basically 2 players who we mentioned, Kenneth Grant and Jonah Seven-Aia, and then a huge gap in talent. So like they
And they
tried,
traded a
but
pick to move up to get Jonah. That was the crazier part.
well, I think they had to, given like there weren't very many, I think, starter caliber interior guys in this class. But that's neither here nor there. They had to do that because they don't have like the money in free agency to spend. Because if you look at the all-in index that comes out every year, they're consistently one of those teams. And I think they're going to continue to be like that, especially if Tyreek Hill stays on the roster with Tua's new extension, that kind of thing. But I'm losing my train of thought here. If you want to, if you want to bank on anything, it's certainly going to be the defense. But I'm with you. This could be a team that sees a lot of changes come next offseason. You mentioned early in the year that they could be a dangerous team. I kind of hope they aren't because we play them week 5. I believe that's in Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. The last 2 times we played the Dolphins, they've just fried us because it's been, well, one was early in the year and one was when Cam Newton came back and Matt Rule fired Joe Brady. And so you could see how bad that O-line was. Cam got sacked like 11 times or something ridiculous. But hopefully they take a little bit of the steam off after September, so we're able to get a win there. I think that's where I was trying to get to.
Once Mike McDaniel shows his cards, if he's got any new wrinkles, that's going to be figured out in the first month. So honestly, playing him week 5 is a lot better than I think playing him like week 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if it was more November, December, they're coming up the Charlotte's a cold weather game, then you absolutely feel confident about beating up on Tua. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not exactly sure what this team is going to be until I see who's healthy. And if somehow Tua is able to stay healthy all 17 games, this team is efficient on offense. Like you pointed out, they showed an ability to be a top 10 defense. I don't know if they're exactly there, but they have the ability to do so. That puts you in that conversation where you could be the second best team in this division. But in my opinion, the second best team in this division is a team that decided to replicate the top dog. And we want a 6'5" quarterback that can run around and do crazy things and has a big explosive arm. And obviously, the first guy, Josh Allen, he was a guy that reminded me of Cam Newton when he came out of Wyoming. And then Drake May out of Chapel Hill. Remember watching his older brother, I believe Luke May, playing in a Chapel Hill Final Four run. I think we got to the title. I'm not sure if I think that was the year we lost to Villanova. It was that 3-point right there at the end. But Luke May had made some crazy shots down the stretch.
Game winner in the Kentucky game.
Mm-hmm. I was remember some of the clutch ones. I think it was against Baylor when some guys were going out and just hitting some clutch free throws. But his younger brother, Drake May, got drafted by the Patriots, 3rd overall last year, and I thought looked like the second best rookie quarterback. And the only guy I thought looked more impressive than him was Jaden Daniels. His poise in the pocket, his ability to create out of structure, and the fact that when you look at this roster, very much like the Jets, they've added adults to the room. Like you can have your thoughts and opinions on Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, some of those guys, but they're proven leaders. They're proven play callers. They're able to put an adult offense and defense on the field. And I think that's a huge step up from Jared Mayo, who was in well over his head last year. So when you factor in those things, I think this is a team that can take a jump because they have an ascending quarterback who I think is really, really special.
I think that they're kind of a year away from that jump, and I'll explain why. I think that you likened how they're doing this to the Jets, getting adults in the room. I agree with that, but I think their roster outside of the QB spot is still like a step down from the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much turnover on both the offense and defense.
You think the Patriots defense is worse than the Jets on paper, like right now?
Uh, Probably.
I can't agree with that. You got Christian Gonzalez. They just brought in the guy from Detroit. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name.
Carlton Davis.
Yep. You look at like the back end, their linebackers, the defensive line. I don't know.
You could go band for band, and I would pick pretty much every position to go to the Jets. Milton Williams, I would take over like Derek Nottie, I guess.
But Christian Barmore, you wouldn't take him over.
I'd take Big Q.
Williams.
Yeah, I'd take Big Q over him. I would take Quincy
Keon
Williams.
White. What about
Big
Keon
Q's,
White?
He's not going to be a starter, but he's a good player.
On the end, he'll be like. That's what I'm saying. Like, are you going to take him?
It'll be Landry
like
and Anthony Jennings because they're outside backers.
You don't think Harold Landry will be like 3rd down?
Keon White is hand in the dirt. I don't think he can play outside backer, but like he's a good player. He's a good like he would start on a lot of teams. You know, it's just they have Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. Unfortunately, but like yeah, guy like Christian Ellis, Robert Spillane, I think the Jets linebackers are better. Gonzalez versus Sauce Gardner, I think they're in the same tier. Like Sauce has been more proven, but but Gonzalez when he's on the field is really really good. And then safety, probably the Patriots at safety. But overall, back to the point at hand, there's been so much change with this Patriots roster, and deservingly so. They were the worst roster in football, like pretty consistently last year. If you look at who's going to change, three new O line starters, a new running back starter, possibly three new receiver starters, depending on how you view Kyle Williams, the rookie. We know Stephon Diggs and Pop Douglas are probably going to start, but then and I'm not a huge fan of the O line, but to your point about Drake May, obviously Bo Nix looked better, right? But I think he was much more insulated. He played in a better system for a better head coach than Drake May did last year. If we can extract the talent and the projection out of Drake May, this team can go a long way as far as a jump goes. You got to remember, this team won 4 games last year. It wasn't a great team, but at the end of the day, it was 3 games because the Bills sat their starters after the first play. But at the end of the day, I still think there's a long way to go. They spent so much money. They have a new offensive and defensive coordinator. Across the board, both offense and defense were ranked bottom quarter in the league in pretty much everything last year. But I think as far as hope goes, out of all the teams we've talked about, the Patriots certainly have the most hope. But I'm not sure that there's enough adults on the football field as opposed to in the coaching room, like I think there are with the Jets. That's just my opinion.
I agree with you that the Jets have a better offensive line. And because of having a unit that can dictate the trenches means a lot in today's NFL, has always meant a lot in the NFL. It's hard to say that on that side of the field that the Jets don't have a leg up. But the quarterback's the most important position. I'm taking Drake May 10 out of 10 over Justin Fields. Like, I don't think that's a question. When you start looking at the pass catchers, I think the Patriots, from a depth standpoint, have a little bit more than what the Jets have. And that's just me personally. You bring in Stephon Diggs, you drafted Kyle Williams, you're hoping a couple year 2 guys take a step. The guy that I think has been impressing the most in camp and had probably the most disappointing rookie season last year was Jalen Polk. You have a guy on the roster in Demario Douglas, who's a proven vet, a good slot player. And then you look at the running back room. Ramondre Stevenson's the veteran there. And then you have Travion Henderson, who could be a huge explosive piece on this offense. And so when you look at that, I think they have a lot of different ways to kind of really be an effective offense as long as the O line is close to average. I think if they have like the 20th best offensive line compared to like the 30th best offensive line they had last year, like that changes a lot of what they're able to do. And I'm just hoping Josh McDaniels structures things enough in a way that he's protecting the offensive line as much as he's protecting Drake May. So if those things happen, I think that's where I'm seeing their ceiling, is that like, okay, they can go from 3 wins to doubling that and winning like 6 or 7. And this is a weak division to where it's like I'm not a big believer in the Jets or the Dolphins getting close to 500 based on the holes and flaws we've talked about. And so because of the upside that Drake May brings, that's what I'm betting on.
You're not going to find a bigger believer in Drake May than me. Like, I was like the initial champion of him being QB1 in that class. I might be wrong. Jaden Daniels might ultimately end up being that guy. But we got to remember, he showed flashes last year, but ultimately wasn't super solid. And my biggest hangup is that offensive line, like you're talking about. I think it'll be better than last year. It's hard to imagine that it would be equal or worse, given how much change is on there or on that unit. But a rookie left tackle, Morgan Moses, who really isn't very good. Mike Onwenu moves inside where he's better. Garrett Bradbury, who was horrific with the Vikings last year, and then Cole Strange, who hasn't been healthy or consistent to start his young career. I'm just not super sold on this group. But if I were buying anybody from this team, it would be Drake May, and it would be their rookie running back, Travion Henderson. I think Henderson has the potential to be the best skill player on that team. He was kind of, I don't want to say overshadowed, but he had to split the ball with Quinshaw Judkins last year at Ohio State. And even though he had fewer touches, all their stats were basically identical. I think he's a real home run hitter. He's willing and able to block in the pass game. And I think that he can be a true difference maker if Vrabel allows him to be. Like, we know Vrabel's best teams have come with Derrick Henry running the ball, toting the rock. And I'm not saying Henderson is anything close to what Henry was. Derrick Henry was a Heisman winner, for Christ's sake. But Henderson, I think, certainly can be the go-to option on that offense.
I see his rookie year being a lot similar to Christian McCaffrey's. I do think Stevenson will be the incumbent. And I think it's just because he's played in a Josh McDaniels offense. He is the starter. Like as much as we want to talk about Henderson, he's great in pass pro. He is a great pass catching back, which is going to make him a great asset on third downs. But those earlier downs, I don't know. And we're going to see what that split looks like to start the year. But that's where, until we get probably closer to the end of the year, I don't see Henderson necessarily overtaking Ramondre Stevenson. And I may be wrong. It's just knowing kind of the old school of thought where Mike Vrabel comes from. Like, you got to kind of earn your keep. And for me, Henderson still kind of has to earn that to have that.
I agree. And even last year, Gerard Mayo said that they were benching Ramondre Stevenson one week. I got the notification via my fantasy app. And then lo and behold, when I turn on
He
Red Zone,
starts.
the Patriots were actually the first game that it was like showing scrimmage because, they show each kickoff. And the first play was Ramondre Stevenson getting a carry. So it might take some time for Travion Henderson to win over Mike Vrabel, but I hope he does sooner rather than later because like I'm a fan of a guy like Kyle Williams. I'm a fan of Pop Douglas, but none of the guys on that in that receiver room or in the tight end room have the home run hitting potential that Travion Henderson does.
No, and that explosiveness is going to be very fun to watch. And I think Drake May and him are going to do some pretty amazing things. Like, probably going back to, like, I'm thinking like Marshall Falk days back with like either the Rams, and then you go to Edgar and James with Peyton Manning. I'm just trying to think of some of these explosive like running backs that like you just pretty much tossed them the football and they did the rest. So I think that is going to take a huge burden off this offense. But like I said, Drake May is the second coming of Josh Allen. And until proven otherwise, he is the king of the East. This is the guy that you have to go through if you want to win. And the Dolphins can't beat him. The Jets somehow have his number like once a year, but I think it's just because like he tries to play too much hero ball. And then the Patriots just haven't been able to do much of anything since Brady left. So with that being said, I think the Bills are still the team to beat. They loaded up a little bit on defense. I like what they did in the draft. Obviously, Brandon Bean was a little offended that fans and a radio show came after the fact that they don't have a lot of wide receivers, and it's just like one of those things that like and. Fans of good teams, like you always feel like you're a piece or two away, and you really are just like a piece or two away. But because of how the salary cap works, you can't pay everybody. You can't have stars at every position unless you're really creative, like the Philadelphia Eagles. And so, with that in mind, I think like Buffalo Bills should be very excited with how the roster is built. I guess my question to you, Jacob, we talked about this with the Ravens last week. Like, how do they get over the hump? Like, does somebody on offense need to step up? Do they need to have like an elite player on defense step up? Like, where is the solution to getting past Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs?
Well, it starts with the man himself, Josh Allen, right? I think when you look at the roster, it's hard to find any flaws, right? They've brought in some good receiver depth this offseason. They added Josh Palmer, who's a good receiver three, Curtis Samuel, they added last year. And they extend Khalil Shakir as well. Like, no world beater receiver ones, but a lot of good receiver twos and threes. Really good O line, probably the best O line out of all the top dogs or top dog QBs. And then on defense, they address some of the major holes. Like Joey Bosa, he's not a star anymore, but he's going to be a really good rotational rusher. They drafted Maxwell Hairston, the speedy corner from Kentucky in the first round. I know we're not huge fans of his game, but he certainly has the traits to be able to get on the field early and often. And he's probably the worst DB in their secondary, which is a good thing for a rookie because it's a weak link system. But it starts with Josh Allen, right? It's not all on him. Like, obviously the entire team crumbles, but it's really little brother versus big brother. I think a lot of it is mentality. That's the coaches too. You got to think last year in the game against the Chiefs in the playoffs, they tried the tush push 5 times and it failed. What was it, 4 times? Like, maybe like they just aren't. I don't know. They're just not ready to win. Maybe they in the back of their minds subliminally, it's like these guys always beat us somehow. We just can't get it done. It's mentality. You got to step up and be like, I'm Josh Allen. I'm the league MVP now. I should be able to beat everyone. And then that should trickle down throughout the team. This is the only team that's favored in all 17 preseason betting odds wise, favored in all 17 of their matchups this season. And they start the year by playing the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football. It's not like the Bills have an easy schedule. So I think, I'm not saying it's all on Josh Allen, but when you are the league MVP, you have to radiate the fact that, hey, we're the best team now. Let's go and get it done.
I want to compare this rivalry to like what like the Panthers had with the Seahawks in the early 2010s. And I can't, because the Bills, every time they play the Chiefs in the regular season, they win. But
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to the games that matter in the postseason, they're 0-4. And it's like quite literally down the split, 4-0, 0-4. And it's like you have their number in the regular season. You figure things out then. And it's just like the Chiefs are just, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, getting things ready for January. And they're the big bro you can't get past. Andy Reid, it was one of the first teachers Sean McDermott had. Like his first shot at defensive coordinator was with the Philadelphia Eagles when Andy Reid was there. And then you look at Josh Allen, he was drafted the year after Patrick Mahomes and has been in his shadow the entire time. So it's that big bro, little bro. And you're absolutely right. As the reigning MVP, you have to be the guy to step up. But it's just like there have been certain games that it's like you couldn't ask Josh Allen necessarily do much more. Obviously, this
Mm-hmm.
past year, you got to get that extra half yard. You got to find a way. Like you got to dig a little bit deeper with your cleats and just get that half yard. But like with this in mind, it's just like you got to have the ability to generate pressure. Maybe I don't know how Joey Bosa really factors into that unless he's just used for the playoffs. Like I feel like if they use him like the Seahawks use Percy Harvin, like and just like, hey, we're gonna keep you for like when it matters, like then you might actually have something there. But it's just I keep looking at how everything's structured. You built the defensive line back up in some of the later rounds to stop the run and not get gashed there. But it's just like you don't have like that true number one lockdown corner like a Christian Gonzalez, or in the case of the Chiefs, like a Trent McDuffie. And that's why I'm just like, I feel like there's something missing on this roster. It's really deep. It's a really good team, but where are the blue chips? We talked about last week, Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, Justin Matabuke. Like, who on the Bills defense are you putting kind of in that stratosphere? And it's hard for me to do that. Like, Gregory Rousseau's not there. Matt Milano, I think, is a little too old. Like, we putting Christian Benford and some of those guys in that tier? Like, what, you see where I'm at, like with this team?
Yeah, I think Ed Oliver is the guy you go to on the defensive side of the ball in that tier. The Ravens have three of them, right? Terrell Bernard's a good player. He got extended. I think Teron Johnson is one of the better nickel corners in the league, but they're not as good as Kyle Hamilton is or Roquan Smith is, right? And when you get to the depth of the roster that the Bills have, the way to get those guys is through the draft because you can't really afford to pay. Well, first of all, superstars don't hit free agency anymore. And second, if they did, a team like the Bills wouldn't be able to afford to pay him, right? They would go like a guy like Milton Williams. He's not a top three defensive tackle, but the team that could afford him was the team with $100 million in cap space, right? The New England Patriots. So you have to draft those guys, and I think they've tried to over the past couple of years with Keon Coleman, but they also traded out of the first round twice, and I think traded down in the second round to get him. And then they tried this year with Maxwell Hairston. So we'll have to see from that point of view. But I think as a whole, they have the roster to get it done. You said that sometimes Josh Allen, like there's not much more he could do, and I agree. It's just Mahomes is just that tier or whatever degree better. Like he just turns it up, and that's like the psychological part that we're talking about, the big brother, little brother. It's so disheartening to like the Gabe Davis playoff game, right? To lead your team down and score with 13 seconds left, and then Mahomes just drives him down in two plays and they win in overtime. Like that's the it's hard to get past that, but I think the team is talented enough to do it. So it's about everybody playing up to the talent level. And that's why I say maybe unfairly, but Josh Allen being the leader of that team, it starts with him.
It definitely does. And this is a top down approach, but like the students got to beat the teacher in terms of a Sean McDermott, Andy Reid face off. And I'm going to be very curious to see if Joe Brady has any tricks up his sleeve to kind of combat some of what Steve Spagnuolo is going to be able to do on the defensive side. And that's where you're hoping is that they just find one or two more answers in these games to pull it off. Because every time they meet, especially in the playoffs, it's like a 3-point game. It goes down to the wire, and it's just picking up that extra first. It's making that field goal instead of missing it, and it's the little details. So until the Bills are able to kind of correct some of those issues, they aren't going to get over the hump. I like that you said the weight does fall on Josh Allen's shoulders. And if you're the league reigning MVP, you have to be that dude. So we'll see if they'll be able to get past that hump as we're winding down on this AFC East episode. Hit me with your perfect take. Are we thinking division as a whole? Are we thinking a specific team or player? Where are you heading?
Keeping it within the division. And I like how when we talked about the Bills, the division was just thrown out the window, and it was like, what can the Bills do to beat the Chiefs? That's like the level that they're at compared to the other three teams. But as far as the second place spot in the division goes, I'm sticking with what I said at the start of the episode. I think the Jets are going to maybe not run away with the number two spot, because I think we agree that 2, 3, and 4 are going to be close together. I think the Jets are going to finish second in the division. I think they're the most talented non-Bills team. And while Aaron Glenn hasn't been a head coach before, Steve Wilks has, and Steve Wilks been a defensive coordinator before, and I have a lot of respect for what Steve Wilks has been able to do as a leader. So if I'm putting my eggs in any of the baskets of the other three, it's going to be the New York Jets this season.
I like it. Obviously, I disagree. Don't think as highly of the Jets. My take. Um, I hate to say this because I love Mike McDaniel, but like you pointed out, like we discussed, this Tyreek Hill beef is just insane. Like every time you're coming to the press conference, you're talking about how your star quarterback and star wide receiver, who you're paying exuberance amount of money for, can't get along. And it's just if that's already happening before week one, and you can see the fatigue on the coaches and players, I think Mike McDaniel's the first coach fired this year. And it's always a shocker. But if this team goes 0-4, Tua gets hurt, like the steam is just going to come right out of this team. And I'm not saying like that's how it's going to be. It's very hard to see them getting to the finish line with a worse roster than they've arguably had the past 2 or 3 years with Mike McDaniel. And if their best swing of things is 9 or 10 wins, it's like, okay, if you miss this year, how bad is that going to look? And that's where I just come back to. I think that's the surprise firing, because even though I think the Browns and the Saints and some of those teams are in a worse position roster wise and may lose more games overall, I just feel like the expectation is lower for them. So those coaches are probably going to make it closer to the end of the year.
About 13 months ago, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, we did an episode where we ranked the top 10 head coaches for each of us
Yep. You're
going
about
into
to say.
2024. Um, I'll just list my top three. It was Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. Your top three were Andy Reid, Matt LaFleur, and John Harbaugh. Not bad across the board, but we both had Mike McDaniel in our top 10. Uh, Drastically different spots. I had him at 10th. You had him at 4th. And the perception, I'm not trying to say you are stupid and got this wrong. I'm saying the perception coming off that 2023 year, when they were setting records on offense in terms of efficiency, when they scored 70 points in a game against what would become a really good Broncos defense a year later, that was kind of a turning point for them too. The perception of how we looked at the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel going into last season, so much different than it is going into this season. I think I'm going to agree with you. I don't think Mike McDaniel, he may not be the first fired, but I don't think he will make it to this point next season as a head coach in the National Football League. I think he's an incredibly talented play designer and play caller, but I think that might be where he is at his best. He might go back to the 49ers when inevitably one of the Kubiaks that they have there gets hired as the next head coach. But I think that's going to do it for us. Jets number 2, Mike McDaniel's getting the kibosh on your side. Next week, we're going to do the South and the West. Probably in that order. We might mix it around just so we can have the Panthers be the last division we talk about when we do the NFC. But it'll be the last two AFC divisions next week. Until then, get us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you get your content. And any parting words before I tell the people to keep pounding?
Uh, Screw Joe Burrow. Like I don't know like what the
All
people want to
right.
hear. But
All
yeah, no,
right.
we'll hop off air with that one.
All right. Joe Burrow MVP next year. But yeah, keep pounding.